Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the major stories in MMA. And on today's episode, UFC 324 is stacked. Lots of great fights, but lots of controversy. And 1 week later, Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopez will clash at UFC 325. Also next year, we're going to talk about that. It's Movsar Evloev and Lerone Murphy that ain't going to be too happy about this combo. And this week, we have UFC 323. We'll dig into the final UFC pay-per-view in this ESPN era. It's actually pretty nice. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con. Look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. Goes is in Las Vegas. He's my co-host on MMA Junkie Radio. Nolan King checks in from Boston. He is the MMA shot caller, the Boston shot caller, excuse me. And Dan Tom, our fight analyst, also in Sin City, ready to bring it. Guys, please, before we get started here with everything we're talking about, I'm talking to the audience, please like the video, and then we'll worry about subscribing later. All right, first topic, guys. Get a good sip of your coffees and your waters, whatever you have by your side. We're going to chop it up. I have a feeling that last week's announcements, you liked some of them and you hated some of them, and I want to hear your reactions and your passions. Dan Tom, Pimblett versus Gaethje is headlining the first event in the CBS and Paramount Plus era. It's for the interim title. Ilia Topuria is having a personal issue and has decided to step aside. He's not giving up the title. He still is the undisputed title champion, and that's why these two are fighting for the interim title. Now, why there's no Arman Tsarukyan, that is also a big talking point. So feel free, my friend. How did you react when you first heard this?
I wish I had a pro wrestling analogy, because I'm sure there is one, maybe sometime when the Attitude Era ended and we're going into the 2000s, it feels like we're about to introduce the Y2J belt. You know what I'm saying? Like, how many belts do we got, or are we going to have by the end of this, guys, at 155? Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, any sort of a rematch, which we'll get to, but it's a fresh matchup. It's one that maybe some of us suspected for marketability, but meritocracy rankings, another vacant champ. Yeah, it's I'm sure we'll talk about the other matchups and the cards, the fights on the card below this, which are good, by the way. But I think a lot of people are definitely reacting to the polarizing nature of this booking between Pimblett and Gaethje. Though I don't know if everyone on this panel is going to exactly be surprised, though, considering how the UFC has kind of been conditioning us with their matchmaking trends, guys.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I already know where Goes is headed. Let's go to Nolan King. What was your reaction, Nolan?
A little out of left field, right? I think there was a lot of different options that we had talked about that had been rumored, whether they were Max Oliveira and Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira, or Alex Pereira and Carlos Ulberg. There was a lot of stuff that we were hearing, and then for this to kind of come out of left field, I was a little bit surprised. I had to process it, think about it. I mean, I think in a vacuum, it's a very intriguing fight, right? Like, Patty taking that step up, Justin Gaethje, the most exciting fighter in MMA history. How much does he have left in the tank? But contextually, and just within the context of the division, I don't think it necessarily makes a whole lot of sense, right? Like, we're in this really frustrating time period where champions don't seem to, I shouldn't say all champions, but a lot of the bigger names in the sport that hold titles don't seem to defend them, or they defend them once and they move up. So we don't really get to see the storyline play out, which I think is hurting the brand as a whole. Now, at the same time, will casuals just, want to tune in and see Paddy Pimblett fight for a UFC title? I do think sometimes in us being so hardcore, we kind of underestimate how many of those people are and how much money those people bring into the UFC. So I don't think it's necessarily anything new that the UFC would lean into who's the most popular versus who deserves it. But yeah, I think as a hardcore fan, to continue to kind of not be able to have divisional rhythm has been a bit frustrating. And this really does continue that here.
Mm-hmm. All right. Goes. How about you, man? Again, no Arman Tsarukyan. Let me remind you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I feel like today's episode needs to start with like viewer discretion is advised or something. I don't want you guys to think that we're going to be hating here a lot. It's really not hating. What it comes down to is it's passion. We love this sport. And some of us, probably the majority on this panel, at some point we're big boxing fans, and we got turned off from boxing because they were doing this exact thing, and the best was not fighting the best. And that's why we gravitated to mixed martial arts. And you saw things like Randy Couture fight Tito Ortiz, and Tito Ortiz fight Vitor Belfort, and Vitor Belfort fight Chuck Liddell. They all fought each other. We never were sitting there going, so who is the best out of this group? Because they all fought each other. What is happening right now is the opposite, and it's going towards what boxing is doing. And that's not right. If you put all the politics aside and you look at the fight, you go, hell yeah, this is a good fight. This is going to be fun. The fans are going to be entertained. At the end of the day, could it turn into being one of the fights of the year or something? Yeah, it could do that, but that doesn't make it right. And I know that's what the UFC is going to try and tell you. It pans out and it's a great fight. Wow, we told you. See, that's not what we're arguing about. What we're arguing about is, I'm not saying Justin Gaethje doesn't deserve to be there. I'm not saying Paddy Pimblett doesn't deserve to be there. All I'm saying is, for it to matter, Arman Tsarukyan needs to be there, because he's the #1 contender. Do you guys remember Contenders, the thing that you make fun of us all the time about, rankings and this and that, and we don't know what the hell we're doing? Well, you got it right. You have him as the #1 contender, yet you skipped over him. That doesn't make any sense. Give us an explanation. Even if it's the world's dumbest one, if you were to say, well, it's because of that headbutt and we didn't like that, at least it's something. It's a dumb explanation, but it's something. Why is this fight happening without Arman Tsarukyan? That is what we need to figure out, and that is the injustice here.
So much so that I wouldn't blame anyone that after they heard this news, if they went online to see if Arman Tsarukyan had passed away, because that's how little sense this fight booking made to me. Did he die? What happened? Is he in prison? Why is he not fighting? In fact, 10 days ago, we were talking about how great he looked. Let's just say that this announcement had been made and Arman hadn't fought yet, right? Then we could maybe say, hey, look, they had to move on. We don't know how Arman's going to look against Hooker this weekend. No, man, we already had that info. It's like, and when Dana White, I remember I went back and looked, when he told everyone, we're going to Qatar, first time, Doha, Qatar, the UFC, and look at the card we brought you. He clearly said, guys, #1 contender, Arman Tsarukyan, taking on Dan Hooker, who always brings it. Something along the lines, but he clearly said #1 contender. It is incredible to me how this guy got sideswiped like that, because the way I see it, Toporia's taking a break in Q1, they called it. So that's January 1st to March 31st. After that, I guess he's available, right? And so in the meantime, we're doing this. And he even gave his blessing. Look, I have personal issues. I understand the division needs to move on. Okay, so that's why they're doing the interim. Cool. We're trying to figure out why Arman Tsarukyan's not included. And I just haven't heard anything really satisfactory, because they haven't really said anything about it. And it's no disrespect to those two, because those two, that's going to be a great fight. No one has a problem. Come fight week, we're all going to be, glazing about how awesome it's going to be. But still, man, this was something else. It caught me off guard. And here's another thing regarding this fight card, guys. On the co-main event at UFC 324 on January 24th, in Las Vegas, the co-main event is Kayla Harrison is defending her UFC bantamweight title versus Amanda Nunes. The legend, the GOAT, is back in action against her former teammate. Big story here. Now, as of late, they've been showing each other some love, but back in the day, we heard Amanda left because Kayla was growing. She was growing. She knew that they could compete at some point. I don't know. Something like that was going on behind the scenes. But as of late, they've been showing some love. So I want your reaction to this, and then I want you to blend it with the first thing we discussed, the first way we discussed. Why isn't this one the main event and not the other one, since this is for the undisputed and the other one's for the interim? Or do you care? We'll go around the circle again. Dan Tom.
The same reason why, guys like Alexandre Pantoja can't get, a main event slot, because, they're flyweights and women are women, and matchmakers love big middleweights. And I don't want to say middleweights too much, because Mick Mader may be an earshot. He might blow his load. But yeah, like, we know what the matchmakers like at this point. It's not the small fighters. It's not the women. And this is a big fight, obviously. You don't need us to tell you that. I'm really curious, speaking of like keeping the same energy that, George was great with showing the receipts as far as Arman Tsarukyan and the promoters' talking points. I'm curious what this one will be, right? because we haven't seen anything like this big since Cyborg and Nunes. And we all know, we were all there for Dana White's tour of his office, and he weirdly had that photo of Amanda Nunes knocking out Chris Cyborg. Why would he have that, Dan, when you just said the UFC brass doesn't really care about women's MMA? And Dana White, notably, is fickle about his own fighters more than his own fans. And Dana White, also traditionally not a fan of women's MMA. He held on to that, folks, because Dana White is a fan of personal petty battles. We know that. And he's had one with Cyborg forever. And it wasn't so much about his support with Amanda Nunes when he was supporting Amanda Nunes, you know. It was very along the lines of Edinburgh is the best pound for pound fighter, you know, when it serves him. It's because he wanted to hold that dunk card. So I'm curious now if he keeps that same energy for Nunes. And if Nunes does get beat, you know, how does from everyone from the promoter to those pundits to the fans go, do we just do that head to head? You know, I know you're a big battle head to head, Gigi. Is it a head to head thing where it's like, is this the GOAT title on the line? Like it is huge, to your point. Like this could be the main event if you're looking at it from a meaning standpoint.
Yeah. Like I say, this one's for the undisputed, the other one's for the interim. Because usually 99% of the time, it's always been the heavier weight class is the main event until McGregor came around and then things switched. But anyway, Nolan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great fight. I mean, arguably one of the top two. I don't want to say biggest just because I know Ronda was kind of her own thing and we could argue about what big means. But one of the, I mean, this to me, this and Cyborg versus Nunes are the two biggest fights in my history of women's MMA in the UFC. I think it's great, tremendous. I think it's kind of getting overlooked and overshadowed by everything else that's going on, right? Like with all the wackiness with the interim belts, and we'll get into the UFC 325 main event as well. But you can't get much better than this with the women's divisions, and we needed it. I mean, it's been 135 particularly is tough times, right? There's not many, even beyond this, there's not a whole lot of fights that you can put on that are even somewhat remotely interesting. So great fight, interesting, you know, has the background of them having trained together. But again, you know, the UFC does kind of run on popularity contests, and that's why Paddy Pimblett's in the main event. So I just hope that it gets the respect that it deserves as a supporting act, because I do think right now a lot of the discussion has gravitated towards the two main events that were announced.
So real quick, Dan, would you have made the ladies the main event? It sounds like it, right?
I mean, in this hypothetical, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't have made the main event that they did choose. You know what I'm saying? I would have made a more sensible main event that probably would have fit if you put Arman Sarukian, even with the meritocracy and the argument I just made. I don't think anybody blinks twice at that booking, right? If we have Arman Sarukian in there. So I'll answer your question with another question there, with another hypothetical there. But yeah, I would probably still have him in the co-main because I wouldn't have put such a polarizing main event on the card. But that is the UFC in this day and age, which, by the way, Go started off this show by hitting a home run, because those boxing parallels were just chef kiss right there.
Thank you,
Nolan,
sir.
who would you have made the main event?
It might be unpopular. And again, if we're going off merit, I think the co-main event would definitely be up there. But I do think that I have less of an issue with promoters doing things like this to draw money, where they put the most popular fighter at the top versus kind of under, you know, taking a swipe at the meritocracy of the matchmaking and kind of controlling the narrative. I think those two things are a little bit different, right? One directly impacts what the fighters are doing, who's successful. This is more like, okay, who can we put on a poster to get people to draw, you know, to buy this? I think that's a big part of what this sport is, regardless of the fights that you make. So I don't have necessarily as big of a problem. They're both title fights in a way. And I guess, again, we've seen it with Conor right before. Like there's been times where he's been maybe above somebody on the basis of being Conor. So like I think with him and Cerrone, right? I'm trying to remember what else was on that card, but there have been times. So I'm not really much of a hater of the placement as I am making fights that don't really make sense because of the popularity.
Goes, your thoughts on that fight booking and its card placement?
Okay, so two things that my colleagues brought up: belts and the word sport. Under the word sport, I have a very big problem with them doing that. That's not how sports work, right? Like, what's more important, an interim belt or an actual undisputed belt? what are you telling the world if you're putting the interim belt above the undisputed belt? You're saying belts don't really matter to us. And I think that's why a lot of fighters are like, yeah, I'm not trying to build a legacy at 145, 155. Where's that champ status? Who can I fight? Who can I do this? They're doing that because that's where the money's at, right? They diminish their own belts. There's going to be situations like this where it's okay to do something like this. But if you're going to be a sport, you can only do it from time to time. If you're going to call yourself a sport and this becomes the norm, which is what's kind of happening here with some of these headlines that we're getting, some of these announcements, that's where it gets a little trouble. If we're just going to call it entertainment, have at it, dude. No problem. This is not the worst thing, like I said, but you can't, when it's one after another, it starts to suck. You know, like when we're watching the Olympics, they don't read off the gold medals and then go, all right, everybody, now what you've been waiting for, here come the silver. We don't do it that way, right? So why would we do it with these belts? Again, every now and again, it's okay. When it becomes the norm, that is the issue. If I'm looking at somebody like Ronda Rousey, I don't think she stands for something like this. And I don't think the UFC would do that to her either. But as one of you guys said, and somebody in the chat too, I think it was Steve Williams, this has basically become a popularity contest.
Yeah. I just want to add another reason too. By the way, according to the Athletic Commission, a sport is when somebody stands there and allows someone to slap them without defense. That's apparently a sport now. So we got to be careful about our definitions goes. But in all seriousness, there are three reasons why I think it's justified for everybody from the fans to us media pundits to be extra critical. It's because this is the end of the pay-per-views, right? Mm-hmm. So what are you telling your fighters, right? With that level of care that goes just explained, like we're no longer paying you guys the same amount. We're no longer giving you that same incentive, which was already underpaying you in the first place. And now what kind of message are you telling the fighters and the fans to strive for when the meritocracy's out, the financial incentivization's out? Like, oh, we're restructuring contracts. And a lot of that talk, guys, it sounds awful a lot like that once was real, now myth of backroom bonus talk, which is not real tangible numbers and real tangible talk. Secondly, you've got a different promoter for the promoter, a different production, a network deal where we're switching over to Paramount. Don't you want to make a big splash with fresh matchups? And I know that somebody on here wrote an op-ed that they got a lot of crap for, but has aged very well, talking about all the things we're talking about now. And all the people that complain about my op-ed, or you go to their timelines, they are complaining about the same things that I highlighted in the op-ed and called. It's fresh matchups. We have the world leader, and everybody's like, wow, this is maybe the biggest break since, like, forget ESPN era, maybe Fox or pre-Fox era, right? When we end this calendar year early in December and we don't pick up until this card that we're talking about now on the 24th, guys. We're talking about the biggest gap here, right? The biggest gap. You've got a new promotion, new people to impress, world leader, bad headlines that George was alluding to that maybe you want to put, and Goz was alluding to that you might want to put behind you. You have all the reason and less excuses than you've ever had in your life if you're the UFC to not put on fresh matchups. And you're giving us fucking interim titles, rematches, and bullshit meritocracy thrown out the window. That's the message we're sending. That's what we're doing with our best break. That's what we're doing with our first impression. This.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of, Dan, I was thinking, remember when they were on Fox and Joe Rogan, they all went to LA and they flew and they kind of did this presentation. It didn't come off too well. I think Chuck Liddell was there, Rogan was there, GSP. And but it just had a little bit more of an official look to it, and we're happy to be here. You know what I mean? And they got their own studio at the Apex now. Why didn't they just go in there and do something a little bit more official with maybe some Paramount Plus executives, with Dana White, a couple fighters, dress it up? Instead, it's like halftime of the Chiefs Cowboys, which is a big audience. I'm not hating on at least that strategy, but still they're there and he's just sitting on a couch and here you go, and boom, go back to enjoying the game. I don't know. Like I would have thought they were gonna make a little bit more of a splash. These guys are spending $1 billion a year, or what is it, Nolan? $1.1 billion a year, I think. Yeah. For 7 years. Like, make us care about it. Make the new fan, maybe not us, we're in, but the new fan say, whoa, what's going on here? Are you serious? Now you don't have to pay. Now I might get invested. But yeah, I don't know. The whole interim thing and Armand getting skipped over when 1 week ago he looked good. How is he still in the doghouse, or how do you explain that? Somebody had an interesting comment here that Ilya screwed Arman, and in a way he kind of did. And he kept saying, I don't want to defend against the guy, but in a way his move caused Arman to not be a part of a title fight in his next fight, I think. So crazy, man. Crazy.
Dude, but the worst part, George, and I don't know if all three of you feel the same way, I hate the way I am acting right now. I know I sound like a crybaby. If you guys were to say that, I would agree with you. I do. I sound like a whiny little bitch, and I hate that I'm doing that. But don't think it's hating. It's passion. It's because when we were growing up, our family members, all that, they all had stories about fucking football, basketball, baseball, and all these experiences. We all, and when I say we all, I mean you guys too in the chat, the audience that watches this is a special time because who gets to say they were part of building a sport and watching it come together? And the things that we've done in the media and all that have helped shape a sport. It's pretty crazy. That's why we hold it in our hearts and why we're so passionate about these things is when we see a threat and we see it started to go towards maybe like a boxing format where we saw that went to shit. We're nervous that might happen. What we want is consistency. What we want is the sport that we've grown to love. We want it to continue to grow. And we want it to be the standard. And little things like this kind of make the waters murky. The belts don't really matter. It's a popularity contest. And it's kind of, again, it's okay to do it every now and again, but it can't be the norm. And that's why we're probably, and this isn't going to stop you guys. This is going to be an hour of this. We're going to be whining because I think we haven't even gotten to probably one of the worst parts of all this.
Steve Williams in the chat says, agreed, goes, they're turning us to bitches, but you're 100% right. It's just because we care. We also got a super chat from Anthony Locate. It says, LLI 6508. He says, love a Dan rant. There it is. Thank you very much for that, Anthony.
One of the few.
And look, yeah, we didn't wake up wanting to rant and bitch and whine, but it's just what we feel from watching the sport for so long. I don't know. I really feel bad for Sarukian. I realize he messed up about a year ago in LA. I know he says his back locked up. The UFC says it was a weight miss. But man, over the year, he paid his dues. He showed up as the alternate and weighed in at 155 pounds there. He didn't get the fight when I think it was Topuria Oliveira. And then he comes in and headlines Cutter. He should not have done the headbutt. I get it. But still, the fight went on and he looked great against Dan Hooker. So now what? Seriously. It just leaves a really, really bad taste in my mouth. As far as who should be headlining, I would side with the ladies because I go weight class, heavier weight class headlines. But if one's for the undisputed and one's for the interim, then hey, we're not trying to sell pay-per-views anymore, apparently. And Paramount believes in the UFC, so just trust the UFC. If they say this is the badass fight and this belt means more because it's for the undisputed, then leave it at that. That's just the way things unfolded. The guy from Spain didn't want to defend, so these guys are going, instead. And we'll figure that out later in the year, interim versus undisputed. But for right now, this GOAT is coming back to face our undisputed. That's the main event. Simple as that.
Yeah. And how long are we going to be proving to people that we're actually really cool? This is a really cool sport. Like, we've been around for a pretty long time. The product is pretty damn good. Isn't Dana White saying one day it's going to take over soccer? Like, why do we need to be in the position where if we don't have this fight in the main event, people are just going to go, MMA sucks and I'm never going to watch again? Like, how long are we going to be doing this? It's a badass product.
Yes, and trust me, it's not like MLB, NBA, NFL. They don't want some of their top teams always in the finals. You don't think they would always wake up and say, I sure hope it's the Dodgers and the Yankees, for example, right? In baseball, it just happened. And what did we just get treated to in the World Series? It was Toronto versus LA. Oh, man, the Yankees didn't make it. Oh, Boston. Oh, all right. And all of a sudden we got treated to one of the greatest World Series ever. So sometimes you just have to believe in your athletes. They may rise to the occasion and become a star that night, but always crafting the same people, like it's ridiculous, man. All right. What happens with Sarukian, Nolan? What do we do with this guy? Does he really sit to wait for the winner of the interim versus the undisputed and then get that winner later in the year? Or do you think that we're just talking out of our asses here and somehow they'll just do Sarukian versus Topuria at some point, and these two I get next for them? I mean, what do you think happens?
I mean, I would say that having Sarukian fight Topuria wouldn't make any sense because there'd be an interim champion, but we've seen them do that as well with John having simultaneous title fights. So I really hope they don't go that route. On one hand, on the other hand, Armin is getting screwed, so I'm not really sure. They've got my brain in a pretzel as to what I'm rooting for here. But yeah, man, I mean, again, like if he sits, it's a really tough position to be in sometimes when you're a UFC fighter, right? To play your cards. You have something happen a year ago that we don't really know exactly what happened, but he says, I just hurt my back. The UFC's not happy about it. Then he's in the doghouse. Then it sounds like he's getting a title eliminator fight. Now he's in a position where he doesn't have any fight and two guys are passing over him to fight for an interim title. So we know the UFC's not a fan of people sitting out and waiting. So I'm assuming he's going to have to fight again unless there's some sort of, background, not agreement, but if it's been indicated to him that they're going to have him fight Topuria, or they would give it to him, that they understand this is a difficult position. But I don't necessarily see that being the case. I think he did an interview with ESPN recently since this news got announced. So he seemed to be a little bit in the dark about the whole thing as well. I don't know who you give him at this point. He's kind of proven to be like the 1B guy at this, that's why we want to see this fight with Ilya. But in a perfect world, and one where grudges weren't held against people, we wouldn't even be in this position. But furthermore, we would not have to hold it against him, or it would not be held against him if he sat out. So if I'm Armin, I'm sitting out, but who knows how long that's going to be, right? You could be looking at like a year or something. So I guess we got to kind of see what Ilya's timeline is and maybe take it from there.
Well, he just sat out 18 months and looked pretty damn well. So I think if he could pull that off, he might be able to pull it off this time. But oh man, that's really, really a tough place to be in. Let's get a quick early lean goes Pimblett and Gaethje. How does this go?
Well, I think Gaethje, how many times have we sit here and said, why doesn't he wrestle? I think this is the one time where I'd say, don't do that, because I think that's probably where you're giving your opponent the better chance. I think if he stays away, makes Paddy Pimblett pay every time he comes within distance, throws a lot of those leg kicks, I think he can make it out of there okay. But if he gets over aggressive, if this fight hits the ground, I think that's where we give Paddy Pimblett a little bit more credit. And to Paddy's credit, I think his striking has improved a little, and probably not enough to put Justin out, but enough to maybe put him down and then get to what he wants to do. But I guess early lean, he's getting up there in age, man. I think maybe Paddy can get this one.
Nolan?
I'm going to lean with Gaethje, but a little caveat. I think Father Time, like Goz said, it's really going to come down to that, right? The last time he fought was March. It'll be about 10 months. You never know when guys are going to kind of hit that U-turn where they start going down the mountain heavily. So it's weird. I mean, Pimblett's rise here, he's beaten some good fighters, but he's also, I believe I saw a statistic that the last 3 guys that he beat are 0-13 in their last 13 fights. So he's hitting guys at their right stride of Bobby Green, Tony, Michael Chandler, right? Guys that are kind of hitting that hill. So is Gaethje going to fall in line with them? I'm not sure, but I do lean with Justin. I think I still have issues with, and Dan's probably going to give you the best breakdown on anybody here, but I still have a little bit of concern with Paddy striking and his defense. We saw him get rocked in a handful of UFC fights. It's a close fight, but I am going to lean with Gaethje.
Okay. How about you, Dan? Early lean?
Yeah, I like what. Thank you, Nolan, for that, by the way. But no, I like what Nolan said. Of course, I'll have my more analysis coming at you guys via MMAJunkie.com later on in Fight Week, as I usually do. But yeah, great points about Paddy catching, Justin Gaethje kind of maybe at the right times here. So I would expect, him to be, closing as a decent favorite. We'll see what the number gets to come fight time. But yeah, if this were like Gaethje Palomino and stuff, and maybe earlier in both their timelines, I feel like it'd be a much easier pick for Justin Gaethje here. But I do want to say that there's an incorrect thing on that stat going around, because it said that he beat Jared Gordon. And that didn't happen. Right? I didn't stick around for the scorecards, but I saw the fight, guys. Anyways, but yeah, he's definitely caught some guys at the right time.
Dan, let me stay with you. Just an early lean on Harrison Nunez.
Yeah, that's a real tough one because I have to fight the misinformation that Ali Abdelaziz was like feeding us from back in the MMA Junkie radio days. You guys remember this? Ali, like even back in like 2019, hinting like, you don't want to know what happens when they get in the gym, bro. You don't want to know. Like, actually, we do, Ali. Can you stop speaking coded and promoter talk? So you gotta I gotta break through that bias. I don't know about you, Goes and George. But I would lean toward actually, I don't know, man. That's tough. I would lean toward Kayla, but I wouldn't be surprised if Amanda comes out, is in vintage form, maybe looks even better with the rest, and if that's the case, then it's Amanda.
Nolan?
It's tough. It's tough. I am going to lean with Amanda, but again, we got the inactivity unknown coming out of this one, right? Versus the aging unknown of the Gaethje fight. So I'm going to lean with Amanda, but we'll see, come our spinning Back Clique fight week, UFC 324 next year, I might have a different prediction. We'll see.
Goes?
I think Amanda. If Harrison had more of an aggressive game from the get-go, she kind of like is pretty patient. I think that'll lean towards Amanda. If there's any type of rust or anything like that, I would go towards Kayla because I think she's getting better. But I think Amanda, man, it's hard to overlook all the things that she's done in her career. And like Dan said, maybe the rest too is going to benefit her more than it would hurt her. So early lean's got to be towards Amanda for me.
All right. Good stuff, guys. I'm sure there'll be a lot to talk about on future spinning Back Cliques because there's not going to be many cards until we get to that first card of the Paramount Plus era, which is the numbered event, by the way. There won't be any fight nights before then. We still have this weekend's UFC 323 card and then one more fight night. And then after that, we get the little bit of a break. I'm getting a lot of people in the chat saying, can Goes talk about Yadong? And O'Malley Goes. Your thoughts on that fight?
Dude, so this is one of the bright spots and everything, right? For me, this fight makes sense, and I think it's going to be a fun fight the way it could potentially play out. I think Song can prove that maybe he's taken that next step, and I think Sean has to prove that he's still up at the top and deserves to be elite. So I love this fight.
Yeah, good fight booking. Nolan, how about you, man? I think it's a good meeting, right? A guy that comes off the top of the hill. We're not saying he's over the hill, but he's just no longer the champ against the guy trying to get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good matchup. I wasn't sure which direction they were going to go with O'Malley, but it seems like maybe a few months ago he started to kind of hint at this, and I think there have been some talks about this fight happening earlier. So I think it's good matchmaking. I think Yadong is a bit overlooked, and I think that O'Malley goes his face. I think O'Malley needs, this is his rebound fight. It's one to see, kind of let's see what he does against the step down in the division. I dig it. Again, this card, as much as we have issues with some of the matchmaking at the top, I think the depth, again, which is what the UFC leans on in this day and age, in a vacuum again, right? Like if we look at this card from top to bottom, there's a lot of strong supporting acts here. Like there's a lot of meaningful fights. You got to kind of tune in for the whole thing, which they have that going for them. I'll give them credit there. And this is a great supporting act below the title fights.
All right, Dan, let's hear your thoughts here. Former champion against rising title contender.
The rising Yadong. If you guys want to hear some real good, puns, you should just read anything that I read, coming out on Damian Pinas. If you read my grading the winners on Damian Pinas' performance, a lot of puns on there for that. But as far as this matchup goes, I actually wanted Sandhagen versus O'Malley. This is a great matchup. I don't want to complain. And in fact, I already said that note, so I'll second it here again where it's appropriate. Like Nolan said, man, it's a really good card from top to bottom. So I'm not trying to complain about any of that, and I'm definitely going to give credit where credit's due. But if you're asking me, I really, and I know I'm not alone. A lot of hardcores have wanted Sandhagen versus O'Malley for some time.
By the way, did Pinas ever mess with Mayanus back in the day, or
Minus? I don't know, but I hear Michael Chavello in my head now, thanks to you. Brown Penis.
All right, Waldo Cortez Acosta goes versus Derek Lewis. I mean, look, credit to Waldo. He wanted to fight in 2025 again. That would have been like his 6th time, but it's just a month later, so it's not like he's taking a long extended break. But he's taking on a fighter who we all love, Derek Lewis, and he's had his fair title shots, but it's a shallow division, the heavyweight division. So tell me about this fight, and do you think it could lead to a title shot for either guy?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I'm very much in favor of this fight. I think the fans win in this one. I think both fighters win. The UFC wins, right? Both guys are pretty popular, and with a win here, you'll have something for whatever happens at the top. But overall, man, judges, we'll have a hot dog, right? We won't be needing you.
Ain't that the truth? Although we said that for Ngannou versus Lewis, and we were throwing hot dogs at those two fighters by the time that fight was done.
Terrible.
Nolan, what'd you think of that fight? That fight booking, is that sound about right? Court, WCA, I'll call him, is delivering with activity and nasty KOs, and with everything that's happening at the top with John Jones trying to come back in, Aspinall, maybe we can get to him in just a sec as well because he's provided an update. It's a lot of confusion. This could be the type of guy that the UFC gets behind, active and a KO artist.
Yeah, I mean, it's smart for them to ride the wave. And I know they did try to book him for the end of the year. And I think it really came down to, like, do we want to just have him fight to fight, like Mario Pinto, like guys that are at the bottom of the division, just do it to break a record? Or do we want to give him a fight that's going to be something that will move him towards the title, we can put him in a big spot against the Derek Lewis? Another name I had heard thrown out there was Teixeira, like those sort of guys. So I think they tried to get him as like a top tier fighter as quickly as they could. And unfortunately, it had to be in the new year. But again, another more depth to this card. And they are, I mean, talk about coming in with some recency buzz, right? Like just a month away, he's going to be back in there. It's somebody that they can promote his story to a bigger audience on Paramount. This guy fights every month and he's winning, and he's turned his career around, former baseball player, yada, yada, yada. So I think Derek's a good foil for that too. Like there's a certain level of danger that comes with fighting Derek, but at the same time, I think it's a fight that Waldo will probably be favored in. So good booking. I think that they did the best that they could on this one to really get the guy to get back in there. Just unfortunately couldn't happen before the end of the year.
Yeah, folks, and if we were whining earlier, trust us, we love UFC 324, the way it's coming together, man. There's a few other ones that we have to get to, but I'll get Dan's quick thoughts. Dan, thoughts real quick on Waldo versus Derek Lewis, and then transition, man. We got to get going here to Jean Silva versus Arnold Allen, also on the same card.
Both solid bookings. I've been obviously, admittedly biased and not the biggest Salsa Boy fan, and you know what? He's come out there, he's won. I got a ton of respect for that and respect for him. His trajectory, it all makes sense. It feels like a crossroads fight, though, guys. We could have an Ngannou Lewis on our hands because both guys like to counter. And but yeah, it feels like a crossroad fights there. And I just will say I was right on Waldo Cortez Acosta as far as people glazing him and using that narrative to fuel against old Tommy Aspinall, which is a whole nother topic. But unfortunately, that's been going hook, line, and sinker as well. Arnold Allen, love seeing it. Makes perfect sense against John Silva. Excellent matchup.
Yeah.
Really excited from a hardcore fan perspective on that one. Really good fight. Not sure if it's going to be a UFC 324, so it won't be a 5-rounder. It's just going to add to that stacked lineup that George talked about. But great matchmaking here. Got to give them the credit when they deserve it.
All right, 2 more to go, and then we'll get to UFC 323. So I'm just going to give 1 to Nolan and 1 to Goes. Talk about the ladies, man. Alexa Grasso versus Rose Namajunas. Could be a title eliminator. You never know. One's a former champ at flyweight. The other one's a former champ at strawweight, but she's uber popular. And, of course, Valentina, with her and the way she's kind of been cleaning out the division, one of these ladies could get a sniff. You never know. It might be tough with Grasso because we've already had 3 of those, but anyway, talk to me about this.
I mean, yeah, you're right. Grasso would be probably a little bit more difficult, but so many other things play into it, right? Decisions of who's staying up, who's going down, location, right? If they go to Mexico, you saw what they were willing to do for Yair Rodriguez. Maybe they do something like that for Alexa. And then when you have Rose Namajunas, like it's really hard not to like her and the way she fights, and not to say that she's not deserving of something. So yeah, I think there is kind of a lot on the line, but at the same time, I could very easily see nothing come out of it as well. But it's a good fight.
Nolan, we ain't done here, man. Umar Nurmagomedov against Davis and Figueiredo. This almost sounds like UFC 300.
Yeah, no, this is super deep, and it's funny, like the way they rolled the announcements out. We got the main card on the NFL, and the Dana went live, and then this one was just kind of like randomly thrown in there, right? So great fight, not to be overlooked. We know bantamweight's super hot right now. Meaningful, again, which checks a lot of boxes for me. We're starting to get in the territory where I'm going to be complaining in a spoiled way about the fact that some of these fights aren't 5 rounds too. So I'll hold that. We've as Ghost said earlier, we've been doing enough bitching here that I'll hold that one for another episode. But yeah, that's kind of the way that I've been feeling.
And someone's going to get left out of the main card. We're going to be bitching about that too, because it's so stacked. There's going to be a really, really solid undercard here. Man, I just realized I done messed up, guys. We can't get to UFC 323 left. We still got to talk about Volk versus Lopez at UFC 325 1 week later. So on the 24th, it's that card that we talked about earlier, right? January 24th, UFC 324. On this one, it's January 31. Alex Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. You might see a February 1 floating around because it'll be February 1 in Sydney, Australia, where this is taking place. So if you'll recall, earlier in 2025, Volk handily defeated Diego Lopez. No disrespect to Lopez and me saying it that way. What I mean is, if you go to MMA decisions, there wasn't anything for Lopez. He's not saying he got robbed. Volkanovski beat him pretty soundly. So what does Lopez do? He fights Jean Silva, beats him, exciting fight. Okay, so he's dusted himself off. He's trying to make a run again at the title. The problem is Volk hasn't done anything since beating Lopez, and there's 2 viable contenders that Volk could have fought in the meantime, at least, Lerone Murphy and Movsar Evloev, and he didn't, and I don't think that was because of his fault. How do we make sense of this one if I haven't racked your brains enough? Nolan, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to the guys.
Yeah, I mean, talk about this one maybe surprised me more than the Pimblett versus Gaethje fight, in that like Pimblett versus Gaethje wasn't really on my radar. I really hadn't thought about it, but this was not a fight that I expected, right? Like we just kind of saw this fight. We had 2 guys that I felt like were 1A and 1B, and you could debate who was ahead of who with Movsar and Lerone Murphy about who was going to get the next title fight. So for them to run this rematch back so quickly too, I was very surprised by it. Diego Lopez is a great representative of the sport. He's super fun to watch. I think he's somebody that would maybe make his way back towards this at some point. So this is no criticism of him. His story is incredible. He's a great fighter. But at the same time, I think to run, really the problem I have with it is 2 things. There's 2 guys that seem to be a step ahead of him in line. And then the second thing is that we just kind of saw this fight. So I feel like there's not as much time for him to improve, for him to kind of round out his game, right? Or whatever you want to call it, for the storyline to progress to the point that a different fight would occur. So I don't really understand this one. I would like to hear like the general explanation outside of like, hey, we think Diego's really promotable and exciting, and we think these guys aren't. I'm guessing that's probably what happened here. But yeah, very strange. I was not expecting this, to be honest with you.
Goes, your thoughts?
What are we doing here? I don't know, man. That first fight, I'm not going to say it got destroyed, but I'm also not going to say it was razor thin, right? It was definitive.
Yeah,
I think that's probably the best way we could explain it. To Lopez's credit, in the last fight, I feel like he took a good first step to us saying, maybe there is something here after a couple fights that warrants him maybe getting another shot. But again, keywords, first step. It's not, we should give it to him now. For Volkanovski, I think he has to kind of consider maybe his legacy a little bit too. Dan Tom, I'm very sorry to even bring this up. You might lose your mind. But he's fucking fought Holloway 3 times, Makhachev twice, and Lopez twice. Like, at some point, dude, you got Lerone Murphy there. He's undefeated. He's never lost. Movsar Evloev's the #1 contender. Why are they not getting shots? I think these skins on your wall will probably help your legacy later on instead of taking these rematches. I'm kind of curious to see what he thought when he got that call. I would imagine the first thing he said was, I'm not going to Mexico. And they say, no, it's actually not in Mexico. Then why the fuck are you giving me this guy again? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me, guys. These are the things that kind of drive me crazy.
Yeah, he's the home body. So they didn't have to satisfy any, fighter and positioning them right in the country they're from, adopted country, like Go said, for Lopez, Mexico, or even Brazil, where he was born. No, he's the one. He's the road game. Dan, I know you hate rematches. That's why I went last to you. I figured while the guys were talking, maybe you take a puff to mellow you down. But what did you think when you heard this?
Yeah, man. I can't say I'm too surprised. You know, it's almost as if there's someone on the MMA Junkie crew, guys, who's been complaining about rematches since 2022. It's almost like that somebody wrote an op-ed earlier this year that covered the boxing parallels, that covered fighters not being able to trust what kind of condition and what kind of honest fights you're going to get from them, rematches and bad bookings. It's almost like these things are relevant, guys, and I've only been proven right. So I'll say the rant, but for anybody fair to be like, this guy is annoying as crap complaining about rematches since 2022. Can I at least get some validation, guys? Are you guys starting to actually see what I'm talking about? Can I get some acknowledgement here?
I hear you. I feel you, man.
I hate him.
The rematch can be done in a certain way. Like I said this to Goes on MMA Junkie Radio last night. When Chael Sonnen put it on Anderson, and then yes, later tested positive, so who knows what would have happened if he would have kept the belt or not. They made him get 2 wins before he came back to Anderson. And I think Anderson had to get a title defense as well. But then the second one was massive. So what it requires is stones from the UFC to roll the dice in their guys, right? Yes, it could happen, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe Anderson loses the belt. Maybe Chael loses to another contender. But guess what? You might have new storylines. In this instance, it paid off, and it was number 2 was way bigger than the first one. You got to let the division breathe a little bit, and you got to have a little bit of faith in your guys so that they can deliver that big payoff. But is the UFC still chasing the big payoff is my thing. You got yourselves on Paramount Plus. You got a huge contract. You make money hand over fist. Like at this point, now just lay back and let the best fight the best. Sorry, Dan, I'm hogging your time.
No.
Yeah. I hear you on the rematches, brother.
No, spot on. I'll just add this because I know we got to jump to the card here, guys. But I'll just say this, that it sucks for the champion because like we just threw Davis and Figueiredo on the screen, right? Like we killed Davis and Figueiredo's prime with those Brandon Moreno series. Say what you like. I love both fighters. There's a great matches, but 4 of them, we literally killed the guy's prime. So now we're killing what's left of Volk's prime, right? And what we're also doing is the old Rich Franklin thing where it's like, dude, how many times have fighters like kind of quietly capped off their career after losing to the champion twice in their division, right? Now, I don't think that can happen with Diego Lopez. In fact, I'll leave you guys with this bold prediction. I think Diego Lopez is great. And if he upsets or even if he loses, I do have hope for him, though. And it's this. It's that he's way too big for 145. And the dream match, whether it's for a belt, which it probably will be for at this point in time because they like Diego Lopez and they also like Paddy Pimblett. That's the matchup that I want, folks. I called Peter Yan, Davis, and Figueiredo when they were in 2 different divisions 7 years before the fight happened. This is my next little canary in the coal mine. Give me Paddy Pimblett versus Diego Lopez. That's what we're going to eventually see. If we eventually see that, I'll forgive this maybe eventually. But yeah.
You know what today's episode's been? It's been one giant therapy session for all of us and for our audience. We've just been able to vent, get it off our minds, and now I think we'll probably move on to the card and just be a little bit more chill.
And that's why I'm hesitant to bring up what I just saw in my timeline.
Oh, no, what?
Another rematch?
Lance Pugmire from Boxing Scene is reporting Katie Taylor versus Ronda Rousey is in the works for a Las Vegas showdown in 2026.
Boxing?
So, well, I just read the article and it actually didn't
coming
say
over to MMA, right?
It didn't say boxing, but I would assume boxing.
Wow.
So just in case we need to.
One day we'll have the technology where Nolan can just drop a milkshake on my head, and that's what that
AI, man.
Yeah.
Katie Taylor against Ronda Rousey.
I knew he was lining up. Yeah.
Did no one see what Amanda Nunes did to Ronda Rousey just with her hands? When Ronda was 8 years younger and hadn't had 2 kids? Oh my gosh. Katie Taylor, folks, for those who don't know, is the one that's gone 3-0 against Amanda Serrano recently. They've had their series. She's older, and so's Ronda, but she's a great boxer. This is really the equivalent of Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua. Only at least they're more even on the weight, you know?
Yeah. My thing is like too with Ronda saying everything she said about her, you know, traumatic brain injury history and all the concussion stuff. I wonder, like, again, how is the commission gonna, you know, I don't know what they're gonna do with that. Like, I feel like I know what they're gonna do, right? But at the same time, I don't know how they justify it. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Do you want to
Did
hear
it
me
say what
spit some more?
umbrella?
I saw that the dateline or the byline was Thailand, but
Oh boy.
it said something about it's drawn the interest of Netflix. But yeah, I didn't see a promotion name in there.
We don't
We've
have
seen,
time. Go ahead, Goes.
We've seen Stranger Things on Netflix, right?
It's true.
Oh
Nice
man,
one,
I
nice one, nice
gotta
one.
get caught up. I gotta get caught up.
All right, real quick. We don't have time, but I'm telling you, a lot of this bullshit that's happening is because these fighters don't make enough enough money to retire and sail off into the sunset. That's something we've heard the last 15 years. He or she doesn't need to come back. They made a ton of money. They're happy in retirement. They can enjoy it. No, they haven't. No, they haven't. Maybe only McGregor. And even then, he parallels what Mike Tyson did, and Mike Tyson went broke at one point. I'm not saying McGregor's gonna, right? But a lot of these fighters, I bet you that's what's happening. I don't think it has to be with competitive juices. I just think it's the money's really, really great and it's hard to turn down. If I lose a few more brain cells, okay. But I'm telling you, a lot of them have not retired with enough money to sail into the sunset. But that would be a whole other topic. We got to get to UFC 323. Yeah. It is this weekend, guys. Excitement level goes 1 through 10 with this card. 2 title fights at the top of the bill.
Put me down for an 8.1.
Nolan.
Go 7.2.
Dan Tom.
I think it's been one of the worst UFC events since 2020, but they're going to end strong, baby. I'm going high. I'm going 9. Pantoja, baby. Pantoja season.
Merab Dvalishvili defends against Petr Yan. Alexander Pantoja against Joshua Van. Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Taira. Henry Cejudo possibly on his way out versus Peyton Talbot. Jan Blachowicz versus Bogdan Guskov. That is your main card. That's what we're talking about here, folks, for the last segment. Please hit the like button. We would greatly appreciate it. We still got 10 minutes to go. Dvalishvili's 4th title defense in 2025. Will the wear and tear catch him, or if this guy just off limits goes, is he really the machine?
I mean, you would have to think that eventually it would catch up to him, but I just don't think this guy does training camps. I think this is his lifestyle. This is just the way he lives. It's his norm. So I think he's just always in peak form. So I'm going to say no.
Do you agree, Nolan? It caught up to Pereira? It caught up to RDR? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think he's different. I don't think we've ever seen anybody like him. Nobody's had a more appropriate nickname in MMA history. The dude is just a different species. Unbelievable. So I don't think so. I think if anybody can do it, it's going to be him.
What do you think, Dan? You've broken down a lot of fights. Do you notice anything different about Merab's performances each time, or is he just always delivered?
Getting better, getting more confident, undeniable, outlier, undeniable. That being said, I don't think he's as invincible as other people have. In fact, I actually thought he lost to Umar Nurmagomedov, going back to watch that. In fact, I feel like you could actually argue a 49-46 Umar card just as well as you could argue a 3-2 Merab card. Come at me. I don't really care, by the way. I think I might have picked Merab in that fight. It's nothing to do with that. But yeah, I will say this, folks. I will say this. Seldom do rematches go the same way in MMA. So be real interested in this one.
Well, that was my next question, Dan. Has anything changed, I guess, since the last fight from what you've seen out of Petr Yan?
Well, here's the thing, we never really get an honest fight, especially this day and age, like we've alluded to, as the headlines have told us, right? And so I try to be careful about that. That being said, when Poatan rematched Ankalaev, fighters can be like, oh, there was an injury, there could be injury rumors. But sometimes you can go back and watch the fight and be like, no, I'm not saying they would have won, but they definitely were fighting compromise. So in theory, if Petr Yan only had one hand in that fight for 5 rounds, and you go and look at the tape and you actually can see you can only use one hand to count the amount of times he throws his right hand, does that get a different fight, right? So I would leave the window open to be surprised regardless of who you pick here. I will say that. I don't think the odds should be as wide as they are, but Merab has earned a ton of respect, and I definitely don't want to take that away from him because he deserves it. But careful, folks.
Mm-hmm. Nolan King, can Pantoja, who is racking up the title defenses, can he ever achieve GOAT status? Now, I get it. You're about to laugh because Demetrius has 11, and I think Pantoja is going for 4 or 5. I'm sorry for not knowing that for this show. Maybe you can correct me when you start to give your answer. But remember the other day there was this release of an old interview that Dana White did with Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo, and he told Kamaru, in my opinion, you're the greatest. He only had 5 title defenses. The GSP's 9. So for the UFC president, title defenses don't mean everything. See what I'm getting at?
Yeah. I mean, he could, right? I think that number, though, for me at least, is the big one when it comes to champions. You know, how long were you able to be dominant and be at the top of your division and knock off the next guy up? Granted, maybe that's unfair to the guys in today's era because there's more challengers out there. We have more flyweights that are top tier than when Demetrius was around. So you got to kind of weigh that in too. I think he could do it. I also just wonder, though, with his age and what he would have to do to kind of get in that conversation to say, okay, I don't have 11 title defenses, but I've got 8 and I fought in a better era. So there's a lot that's going to happen. But sure, I mean, he's looked great. He's looked tremendous. And I mean, if he gets through Van, that's another probably the challenge that people have been most interested in since he's been champion, right? Like we had some interest in Asakura a little bit, guy coming from a different, promotion. There was that whole thing, but then he just totally wiped him. So this is probably the most intriguing fight that he's had for a lot of people, myself included. And so if he gets through this, I think, I don't know. There's always going to be flyweight is so deep, and there's a huge wave of really top tier talent coming from the regional scene. So I don't think it's going to get boring ever. He's going to have a lot of tough challenges, but if he beats Van, then I think, sure. Yeah. Why not?
Because I'm a little short on time, so I'm just going to move on to something else with you. What is in the best interest for the UFC? A Pantoja reign, right? The stars being built little by little, or something fresh. Let's say Van wins, and then all of a sudden, all those rematches that Pantoja had been dealing with, now they're fresh matchups for the new champion.
It's a good question. I would say if I'm thinking the way the UFC does, it's a big market in Mexico, right? Going to some of these places. So maybe, Van victory and figuring out some of these other guys can fit into the title picture. Probably that.
Yeah. Flyweight does have Manel Kopp hasn't fought for the title, but he has fought Pantoja. Kyoji Horiguchi is back, the Gooch. Yeah. And if the UFC were to just go all right and make peace with Muhammad Mokaev, they could have yet another fresh body to infuse this weight class, which I predict that in 1 year is going to be one of the more exciting weight classes, because like Nolan said, there's a lot of studs coming through as well. But best result, it could be Van, folks, for the UFC. They don't know it yet. Moreno versus Tyra. Dan, you break down a lot of fights, and you've broken down a lot of Brandon Moreno fights. Is he one of the more exciting fighters to break down just because he's so active and he does well with his hands? He does well on the ground.
Moreno's a real talented fighter. I was actually doing some research by listening to your guys' interview on MMA Junkie Radio. I was killing it with the interviews. You guys had a really good interview with Moreno. I like where his headspace is, man. From your guys' interview alone, I almost want to lead toward him, especially if he's getting, discounted as an underdog here. That being said, man, Tyra is pretty undeniably special. And I think Moreno, he's an exciting fighter. He's a great fighter, but I also think he's matchup dependent, right? So whether or not this is a good matchup for him, whether or not it's a winnable matchup for him, this could be a matchup, whether he wins or loses, that it's not as exciting as a normal Moreno fight, maybe because of the dynamic. I have a hard time seeing it not being exciting because it's flyweight. But it's a really good matchup in Moreno. It doesn't sound like he's done yet. So anybody winning interest in him, I think you should leave the door open for Moreno here.
Nolan, talk about Cejudo. Henry Cejudo against Peyton Talbot. Again, we got a guy who was at the top on his way down against a rising contender.
Yeah, clear UFC matchmaking of an old guy versus young guy fight that they seem to love to do these days. Who knows how much Henry has left in the tank, right? It's been kind of tricky to figure out what he's trying to do. He's at times disappeared. He's retired. He's come back. He's looked old. He's seemed like he isn't really into it, and he disappears, and then he's fighting Peyton Talbot. So I don't really know. I think it's really going to come down to him. I think Talbot had a nice bounce back fight last fight. He beat Felipe Lima, who I think a lot of us were maybe thinking was going to do the same to him or do that to him. So I'm going to lean with Cejudo still. I don't know why I always side with vets when it comes to a guy going up and somebody coming down. Prove something about being proven, but I am going to lean with him to get it done with his wrestling.
Yep, and we're almost done here. So real quick, another highlight from this fight card that you're excited about goes?
Macy Barber and Karini Silva. I'm actually kind of interested to see if Macy Barber can just get over the health problems and be back in the picture, because she's a fun fighter and I think she can add to that title picture.
I think she's got like a 6-fight win streak, but yeah, she's got to get past the weight issue and then the performance, and then we'll see if she's back. She's had about a long spell away as what Armin did prior to his fight in Qatar. How about you, Dan? Another fight that you can highlight from UFC 323 happening this weekend?
Duncan McKinney, I should say. Shout out to the Highlander, but Duncan McKinney should be an awesome fight, man.
All right, I like that one too. All right, Nolan King, finish up. What's another highlight for you?
That was going to be mine, but I will go with Bogdan Guskov versus Jan Blachowicz. I think Guskov has been really fun to watch. I don't really know what his ceiling is, but he has nuclear power in his hands. And to see Jan Blachowicz come back after a little layoff, he could, who knows? Maybe Guskov will surprise some people. And I think he's a slight underdog right now, but he's got serious power. So I'm excited for that one.
Yeah, and that was going to be mine. So now I'm going to pivot. I like Dawson versus Torres. Dober's got some nuclear power, man, but Torres shut him down. I like, that Mexico's giving us a new wave of stars aside from Yair and Moreno and Grasso, but I think Torres could be a big deal. However, Grand Dawson is like the American version of what the Dagestanis do, and that's just get you down, smother you, and he could just make this kind of a dominant / boring fight or whatever, however you want to look at it. We'll see if Torres can stop it. Who knows? Dawson's 10-1-1, and he's still not even getting the upper echelon fights. So you can tell the UFC's probably not too keen on him. Anyway, folks, thanks so much for always tuning in to Spinning Back Clique. On your way out, if you could hit the like button, that's the thumbs up. We would greatly appreciate it. Also, kindly consider subscribing to the channel. We have a lot of free content, and we're going to be all over it this week with Ken Hathaway and I think Mike Vaughn on site, and of course the rest of the team supporting. We got all the interviews that the fighters will do one-on-ones. We have the pre-fight press conference. The actual weigh-ins will be live on our channel, the ceremonial weigh-ins, and of course Goz and I will be doing a watch along Saturday night starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And don't forget to check out Dan Tom later in the week as he does all of his breakdowns. For all you people that are gambling, you want to see all the intricacies, all the breakdowns, all the stats that he throws your way. So check those out. Folks, enjoy your week. Go out and be a champion. We'll talk to you soon.